And we are live. Good afternoon, alienated parents, alienated grandchildren, alienated grandparents, and alienated children worldwide. Welcome to Let's Talk, Real Talk on Parent Alienation with Andy Martens and myself. I am from Hamilton, Ontario. Andy is from the Sioux in Canada. And tonight's guest we have all the way from the UK, who is in court right now, believe it or not, in New York because his daughter was kidnapped into a different state. We welcome back Keith Roberts from, this is our part two. He was on the show on Tuesday, the 25th. If you want to look at that podcast, and then you'll know where he was coming from the whole time. I'd like to welcome you both back. Andy, I'm going to let you run the show for a bit while I share this with viewers worldwide, because this is very important for people to understand what Keith is going through, because many people across Canada, the US, and the UK are all dealing with their children being taken over from one border to the other and not knowing where their kids are. So welcome, Keith and Andy. Take it away, Andy.
All right. Thanks, Mary. It's a pleasure, as always, being here on your show with you. And this is the first of two shows today. Mary and I will be back on the Andy Martens Network tonight at 8 o'clock. So we are live right now. And welcome back, Keith Roberts. There's a lot of nice places north of New York City there. Keith, Poughkeepsie, and it's a lot of people live outside of New York these days, just like they live outside of Toronto in Ontario in Canada, because it's a little pricey to live in the cities these days. So welcome back with your situation. I'll tell you, it's a tough one. We were talking about all of this, and you were saying correctly, is all this that you're dealing with, most people have jobs that they need to earn money. How do you deal with all the what you need to do around you while this is happening with your daughter?
It is very difficult. Literally a month before I found out about my daughter's location being confirmed in New York City, I just started doing a degree in business management with Oxford Business College and through the University of West London. So I had made an acceptance of what I feel to be old age at 41 to start doing a degree. So I was already going to be on limited income. And finding about my daughter, I have not only been trying to fight the unfair US or New York City court system and trying to protect my daughter, learning about US laws, learning about international laws, whilst doing a degree, and also having to now work to earn money to get by and cover costs associated with this case and getting to and from America from the UK. But I was also due to get a new ethical property development company off the ground as well. So I've had a lot going on in my life, and to have to put two important things on hold, all because the ACS have refused to do the legal and just thing, ethical thing of returning my daughter home to me, just seems preposterous. How they can almost say, we can keep your daughter for an indefinite amount of time whilst you fight us for her, whilst they're perpetuating more damage being done to my daughter. I got a chance to talk to my daughter, and she was explaining a traumatic experience she's been through regarding her mum being taken away in an ambulance. And you've got all these things going through your head. It's very difficult trying to concentrate on anything, really, let alone trying to earn that money to keep this battle going. This will be the last time I can afford to come to the US to fight for my daughter's case, put it that way.
And sleeping at night, too, that probably keeps you up with at night as well. We all need proper sleep during the week,
Yeah, it certainly is difficult. You constantly have a restless mind. knowing that your daughter is with a foster mother who is abusing her. Psychological abuse that the foster mother is committing is absolutely heinous. But they allow it to continue. So trying to go to sleep, you kind of have all these thoughts of, why are they doing this? What is their goal to allow a child to become more traumatized and more damaged? Surely if they're children's services and they're there for the betterment of children, for the betterment of society, surely it should be about, this is a good parent, they can provide for this child. The child had an amazing relationship with this parent. Let's send them back. Why drag it out for currently a year and a half that I've been involved in the case? Your mind is always going on this.
Or the most they could do, at least give you 50-50, give you something out of this deal.
Exactly.
The problem is my daughter is with a foster mother. And the foster mother, there's a legal requirement that, reunification must be the primary goal under federal law. But this foster mother's admitted in court that she only took my daughter into her home to adopt her. She never had any, thoughts of that my child should go back to a parent. It was simply just to keep her.
Can I interrupt?
Sure.
I thought when a parent gets back the children from a foster parent, the foster parent is out and then they refoster and refoster. They're only there temporarily. How do foster parents get kids permanently when it's not the way the system's supposed to work?
It's clear to me that the Administration for Children's Services and their adoptive agencies and foster agencies, their only goal is to keep federal funds coming in. So, the longer they keep my daughter there, the more federal funds come in. So New York City as a whole, they have to provide a certain amount of funding for jobs within the city. How can you get more money into your city without creating wealth in that city and jobs? Simple, you take people's children away. You then keep those children because they get over $100,000 a year, I believe it is, for my daughter in federal funding. So the city gets free money from the federal to support these children that they illegally remove.
I read last year that, dead or alive, the courts are making $350,000 on our children a year.
Yeah, I mean, you've only got
dead or alive.
Yeah, Grace Obama-Layat, the family court judge, who is an absolute deplorable human being in my case. She's on $209,000 a year or thereabouts to sit there, support the Administration for Children's Services and destroy children's lives.
Unbelievable.
She's a former attorney for the child, so she knows the whole system. She should be advocating for the safety of children, not allowing those children to become harmed even more. And
yes.
in court just over a week ago, the judge made an order for me to stop making social media posts about the case. And I told the judge it's not going to happen. I've got my First Amendment right, and I will use that to protect my daughter as best I can.
Good for you.
And the judge, what's the worst they can do to me? I don't really care. My daughter's safety comes before a judge's wishes to silence the vile things being done to my daughter.
Exactly. And once the children opt out in court, become 18, you have no hope in hell to save those children. And the children don't realize that they've been brainwashed, trafficked at that age. Still, they're still young. They're impressionable at 18. I know what I was like at 18. I didn't know the law. I had no idea whatever I was going through was domestic violence or, being alienated from a parent. So our kids at 18 have no help. They become the abuser, the future abuser, because the mental health care system is falling apart because there's so many children traumatized through parent alienation. My ex-husband, 64 years, he's been going through it. And not once did he ever step in front of a therapist to deal with it. His mother took his father He grew up without a father, got a stepfather at 14. She remarries, mother remarries, has a new baby, pushes him out the door. So he became a bully, a rapist, a street fighter, joins the army thinking that'll turn him around. It made him worse. He became very arrogant. This is what happens. We
Sure.
see that in our children because our children, our adult children, are controlling the parents today. Money, blackmail.
I was just say I've spoken to so many psychologists that have all said the same thing. If you fail to address early childhood trauma before that child hits puberty, it then gets reprogrammed into their brain as long-term trauma, at which point it's very difficult to try and repair that damage because it gets hardwired into your brain like a natural instinct, a natural reflexology, reflex action to something that happens in your environment. And I spoke to the judge about this. I said to the judge, I've been speaking to a psychologist from the UK, I think I mentioned before, that writes policy for the UK police and the courts on how to deal with people with mental health issues. And when I explained to her the situation, she said to me, you've got to get that therapy started. You've got to get this damage being caused, start to unravel it before that child hits puberty. And I told this to the judge, and the judge completely ignored it. The judge has ignored the advice of a psychologist who knows far more than her about childhood trauma. And the judge has even failed to get a second opinion from their own people in the United States. Now, a fair system would say, yes, if you can prove you had an amazing life with this child and she turned and told you you were the best father in the world, she loved you unconditionally, and then for that child not to want to talk to you, what happened in that period of time? What trauma has she been exposed to? Now, one of the traumatic things my daughter was exposed to was her mum, who was suffering with mental illnesses, being taken away in an ambulance. My daughter described the brickwork, the ambulance, the EMTs that attended that day, and she described what her mother looked like. So my daughter has got this imprint in her mind of the trauma she went through. She was promised that she would be allowed to see her mum again. And 3 years on, pretty much 3 years on now, my daughter's not had a chance to look at her mum, talk to her mum, all because it's in the interest of the state to keep that child.
Yes.
They don't want you to build a relationship with their parents because they stop getting government funding, federal funding for it.
Well, that's
and
it.
It's horrible.
Justice Taylor said the same thing on December 23rd, 2005. He's leaving it up to the discretion of the children. What the hell?
Yeah.
Who left it up to the children when I was changing their diapers? Feeding them, working for the government. I was worked for the military police. I protected children and men and soldiers and women. And there was no discrimination in my home other than my ex-husband. He was a soldier, always gone. So I had to take care of everything. And then all of a sudden, he left it up to the children? Are you for real? So Justice Taylor in Kitchener, Ontario, Canada, should be held accountable for trafficking my kids. My adult son is in the Navy. I already said this in the last video, but he's hurting. He is so damaged that he blames me and he's punishing himself. So our kids are out there school shooting, killing parents, killing siblings, suicides, murders, suicides. I mean, this is crazy what's happening to our children. So that judge that you're dealing with needs to understand that, your daughter at 12, 13, 14, I mean, she's only 11 right now, can suffer severe setback, knowing that you will never have her again after the 4th of April.
Well, one of the key things I don't understand is there are so many cases in law based on informed decisions. The judge is saying that my daughter, at 10 years old at the time, had the intellectual capacity and understanding to know that by refusing to talk to me, that she had the capacity to understand the knock-on effects of this, the fact that if she gets adopted, she will never see her mum again. She will never
What
see her
what
father
age was that at?
10.
She was 10 then.
You know, the judge, they basically went to court. The Anna Shizzle from Lawyers for Children set up an illegal meeting between my daughter and I, in which my daughter said to me, she said, "Daddy, I love you. I will always love you, but I want to stay here with my adoptive family."
Sounds
So
like
it was already a done deal. How can a
yeah,
10-year-old make a statement off the bat straight like that?
they brainwashed her.
She's been brainwashed.
She's
And
been
it's all right
brainwashed.
if the foster mother has never got any intentions of working towards reunification, then that is going to create an environment within the household where the child is hers. So she does what she wishes with the child. I mean, one part of the case file even had something stupid like, and to me, it just seems a bit icky, but the foster mother was getting my daughter to oil her hair for her. It's like, hang on, that's something you would get your own child to do for you, not a child that's currently in your care. You know, and there's various other bits and pieces as well where my daughter's been doing a lot of sports and sports has been linked to being able to get your aggression out and get your frustrations out, and it's very good for mental health. And my daughter one day in class apparently asked the teacher a question, and the teacher scorned her for it. And then the foster mother decided to scorn her even more by banning her that week from doing the sporting activities in which she likes doing. So she's basically taken something away that there's a high statistical chance my daughter is doing that alleviates the stress and harm that she's going through, just so this foster mother can try and exert some sort of power over my daughter. Now, why was my daughter asking a question? Because some of her peers in the class were struggling to understand what the teacher was talking about. Now, if anything, that should be praised, that your child is trying to help people in the class
Yes.
that are struggling to understand. And to be scorned for it it just reeks of this archaic mentality that children should be seen but not heard. And
They're silencing the children so that they don't speak out.
Yeah. You know, we don't know what trauma my daughter's been exposed to entirely by the foster mother, but the agency, and this kind of sickens me, that they made an admittance that they had to go in court. The foster mother made an admittance that even if the goal was changed to reunification, the foster mother would not promote it within the house. And she admitted that in court in front of the judge.
She should be removed.
Absolutely.
That's a sign of that's child abuse.
It is child abuse.
How could they keep her as a foster mother?
Yeah, she admitted in court that her only goal was foster to adopt.
That's sad.
That policy, foster to adopt, does not. It is not in policy in New York City. It's not something you can legally do. It's kind of you foster, and if after a period of time, return to parent is not possible, you might get an opportunity. But as a standoff point, it's not a policy that exists. And she said this in front of the judge again. So Cardinal McCloskey, the foster agency, had to go to the foster mother's house and explain to her her legal obligations under fostering. And then they admitted to me in an email that they had been to see the foster mother and explain her legal requirements as a foster parent, but then made an admission that they can't control what goes on behind doors. If you can't say with reasonable conscience that that person is a good person and they will look after the interests of your child while they're looking after them, that person shouldn't be a foster parent. It's as simple as that. So they've made an admittance that this foster mother can't be trusted, but they're not willing to do anything to rectify, you know, the course or the behavior of this woman. I don't understand that sort of logic.
Me neither. That's just it. Well, it's all about money, Keith. We all know that, like you were saying, they'll lose all the fundings if your daughter goes back with you.
Well, this is the case, but what's going to hit them hard now? There is now a class action lawsuit been filed against the ACS and their agencies.
Good. I just heard there was one in Australia today on LinkedIn.
Yeah, and it needs more of this. What we need
It
is we need
does.
more members of the public that have been affected by trauma induced by child services unreasonably. You know, we need people to come out and say it. We need people to come out and give their experiences of family court judges being biased and unreasonable and certainly not blind to the letter of the law.
Mhm.
You know, we need these people to start coming forward. We need a movement that is so loud internationally that new international laws must come in to protect children globally. It doesn't matter what country they're in. There should be equal
Well,
rights across the globe for children and families to exist without harm being introduced by government agencies.
exactly. After what I found 3 weeks ago, totally destroyed me, because for 18 years I'm being punished, being called a child abuser, a drug addict, an alcoholic. My kids never saw me drink, never saw me abuse them, never got hit. My kids got spoiled. I raised everybody else's kids with my kids in the homes. I put pools in, gave them whatever they needed, education, love. They went in the fridge, got whatever they wanted, to being accused of starving them at 14, 16, and 18. It's like, what? Me starve you? I had my own catering business. These kids had food galore coming out of their, you know, backpacks were packed so that they could share in school with kids that didn't have food. To be accused of all this, to finding my son in the dark web, being sex trafficked. This is so sick. My daughters are drinking. They got rewarded on our divorce day in 2007 to go out and drink. There they are on video, Facebook, videotaping, 17 and 18 years old, these girls. And yet I get accused of being an alcoholic, and I never drank. They weren't allowed to drink. And then I find out my son's accusing me of doing cocaine. I have never done cocaine in my life. Where's he getting this from? He was 18 years old. He walked in on me. I was smoking a joint, but it was given to me prescription. I was on my last 3 years of life. I didn't want to tell them I was dying, but I had the prescription given to me because I was beating so many, like dealing with a lot of illnesses at the time from a car accident. So I thought I'd give my kids a good life and not tell them. But my son walked in, and all of a sudden the joint turns to cocaine. Now, these lawyers who are doing this to our children, because I know my ex's lawyer, Robert Hawes, in London, Ontario, pushed my kids to the limit. He is shown on Zoom trial on December 2023, badgering my son. I had to email my lawyer because it was on Zoom. I'm in Hamilton, they're in London. I had to tell him to stop, tell the judge to stop the lawyer from badgering my son. He's suffering. He literally had a psychotic episode at 34 years old in a Navy uniform. He should not have been on Zoom trial, first of all, in a uniform, because that's against their religion. I mean, everything's sacred in the military. But here, this boy, he's still a boy. Got to remember, they're so mentally, emotionally, and psychologically abused that they're stuck in the day they were taken from us. My son will always be 18, no matter how old he is. The other ones will be 17 and 15. They act like it. Their bodies are adults, but mentally and emotionally, they're children. They're stuck. They're abused. They've been brainwashed to the point where it's like a cult now. They're following the leaders.
Yeah. I mean, it's when I came over in January, you know, I've made quite a few contacts, and one person that I'd been working with, Joyce McMillan from JMac for Families, she invited me to a conference that was happening in New York City, and I was sort of like, I've got a court hearing first thing, but as soon as that's over, I'll pop over and you know, I'll slide in and see what's going on in there. And it was absolutely unbelievable. There was a pediatric doctor who had been working with a mother who he described as being an amazing mum, a really, really good mum. And it took her 3 years for her to make an admittance to him that she had a problem with drugs. And he was quite shocked, and why did it take her 3 years? Because it wasn't until 3 years that she could trust him enough for him as a mandated reporter not to report her to the ACS. But in his own words, he said that this woman was an amazing mother. She took care of all the children's needs. And then I believe the story went that he helped her to get off her addiction. But why do we live in a society where somebody who wants help and needs help doesn't get it?
It's denied.
Instead, what we do is we try and force more trauma onto that person.
Yes.
In order to, almost create this wedge and as much damage as possible. There's a judge called Leonard Edwards who wrote the book on reasonable efforts. And I've watched a few of his videos that he's got on his website. And he himself is talking to people as a retired judge point of view, saying, what is reasonable? If a family has got no car and their car's broken down, it can't be repaired, is it more reasonable to give that family $2,000 in order to get a car so they can carry on working, so they can carry on providing? Or is it more reasonable to take those children away, spend hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on taxpayers' money to keep these children away from the parents, at which point you expose those children to trauma? They then become part of a perpetual cycle that just keeps feeding this industrialized child harming machine. And we have to look at it from a societal point of view. We have to be willing to give people a hand up to better facilitate help for their families rather than just take those children away. It can't be the answer that taking children away from parents in 99% of cases is better than giving a little bit of help.
Right.
It can't be right. It's unethical on all grounds. You use the taxpayers' money to take children away. You use taxpayers' money to pay a foster parent. That foster parent then adopts that child. You pay the foster parent even more money and give them a load of tax credits and, free healthcare and everything else as part of the system. Why didn't you use those resources to help the family?
Exactly.
$100,000. For $100,000 for 1 year, you could provide child services to help look after the children, whilst that parent went and done a degree, which allowed that parent to get a better job. The whole family unit stays together. They're paying more in taxes, so the whole of society gets better. So it has to be better financially to give people a hand up to get to a better position, give them education to help them manage their family better if they're struggling to understand what they need to do, than just take children away. All the evidence, you don't have to be an Oxford scholar to look at this and go, that has to be the way forwards.
Setting up the children for future rehabs, because the money is going back to the government or whoever, and the kids don't get any better because they're going to be rehabbed and rehabbed. They're going to keep going back and forth because when they come out of rehab, they get an incentive, like you said, $2,000-$3,000. What are these kids going to do? They've been stuck in rehab for the 30 to 90 days. They're going to go see a drug dealer.
Yeah, but
and then end up back into the rehab program. So this is money made over and over on our children. This is why they don't want children to be happy, healthy.
No, but one thing that I don't understand is we have a load of regulatory bodies that an ombudsman that overlook various sectors of society to make sure that they're behaving ethically, and where you missold credit, were you given a credit card balance that was too big for your income. We've got all these agencies and everything else looking out to say, are these people acting ethically? But yet when it comes to children's services, which you could argue is the most important sector to be looked after, because our children are supposed to be our future. How we raise them and treat them will reflect on how society moves forwards.
Yes.
How comes the Administration for Children's Services doesn't have a governing body that overlooks not only the legality of how they operate, but also the ethical impact of how they operate? I've been to the ACF, the Administration for Children and Families. I've been to the OCFS, Office for Children and Family Services. I've been to New York Mayor's office. All these people, I made over 10 complaints to the ACS advocacy line, and not one single complaint has been seriously looked into. So you've got a children's services that can do anything they like. They're beyond reproach. Nobody can stop this industrialized machine harming families. How can you have that? How can you have nobody saying, hang on, we need to put the brakes on here. Have a look at this. We're getting too many children that were in care that become part of the system later on, and their children become part of the system later on. If this is a perpetual cycle,
Generational.
what we need to do to stop this cycle, that agency should be there, but there's nobody. So they do whatever they like.
Mm-hmm. It's a generational curse. I mean, I'm on my 4th generation. My children are already telling me I'll never see my grandchildren. And if they do have children, well, I should say one of them said if she does have children, she will tell her children that I was an abusive mother, crackhead, alcoholic. I mean, they're already setting up a child that's not there to be abused, because that's traumatizing to a child to hear that your parent or your grandparent was this, this, and this. When my children grew up, they didn't know their father was a rapist. They didn't know their father was an abuser, like a street fighter. They didn't know he broke the law and went stealing, and he joined the army so that he could get off the streets, only because there was a reason why he married me, so I wouldn't have him charged with rape. And he told me after we got married, he said, now our wife can't testify against the husband. And, he brainwashed me to believe that I had no more rights after I got married. So I had to put up with all his garbage. But my children never knew. Not once did I ever say that your father did this, this, and this, and this. I tried to put the past and make him into a better man. I stood up for myself. I did. Knowing that he was gone, I had to pay the bills, take care of the kids, work, dogs, everything. I was the sole provider. For him to walk into divorce court and tell the judge, Justice Taylor, that he was the sole provider because the children told the judge I was a drunk and always passed out on the couch. And I'm thinking, whoa, I was lucky if I got to go to sleep at night, because I had to do all the kids' packing for the school the next day, laundry, all that. We all know what a mom and, a stay-home parent. I wasn't stay home, but I was a working, like I was off because I had a car accident. So I had to stay home for 1.5 years. I couldn't work. But that 1.5 years, I was condemned as a loser because I wasn't bringing in money. No wife of mine's going to stay home and eat bonbons all day. What did you do all day? This is the kind of stuff I had to deal with when he came home. And I'm thinking, better off I just go to work and I don't have to deal with it. But it's just, when you go to court, you're condemned for everything that they did. There's projecting all the abuse, inflicting everything that happened and blaming you. And these judges are taking word for it without you even having a word in court. I never got to say anything in the trial. 9 months. I wasn't even acknowledged. They kept shutting the camera off on me every time my children came on. I had to email my lawyer and say, hey, can I be shown on the Zoom trial? I want my kids to see me. They're adults.
That is very indicative of family courts.
They're hiding a lot of stuff.
Yeah. So the Administration for Children's Services were allowed, their attorney, Sabrina Rossi, was permitted to ask questions to the case planner. Did Mr. Roberts contact you in 2018? And then 2019, 2020, 2021? You know, they were allowed to go back to the day my daughter was abducted to ask me if I had had communications with an agency 3,500 miles round the world, and of which I'd never even heard of before, in order to make out that I had not done my due diligence in trying to locate and find my daughter. And yet, I started giving testimony in the last court hearing, and my attorney starts off with the standard questions. Where were you born? Straight away, the judge gets on her rod and she turns around and says, we don't need to know. We know where Mr. Roberts was born. And my attorney's explaining, this is about getting things on the record. This is about, if this goes to an appellate court, you know, at a later date, this is about everything being on record that needs to be on record to put a case forwards to have a decision overturned. And then the judge, my attorney, started asking me more questions, going back to 2018, which is when the ACS were permitted to ask questions and when the attorney for the child was permitted to ask questions from. And yet the judge turned around and told my attorney that it's a 6-month period of time for permanency. Now, when my attorney says, well, what is the 6-month period for permanency? Because the permanency hearing has already gone on for over a year. The judge got hostile with my attorney. I told you last time. No, that's not an answer. You tell us when we're allowed to ask questions from. You've already awarded these people a period of time to besmirch my or try to besmirch my reputation and the efforts I'd made with UK authorities to find my daughter. And the trauma that I went through, thinking that I might never see my daughter again. The fact it's akin to losing a loved one, somebody dying in your family.
It's a living death.
And they want to cause all this harm to you. And then when it is your turn to be on the stand to argue the points of what they've said is factually incorrect, the judge won't allow you to fight those points. Now, so the judge has either willingly allowed a permanency hearing to go on much longer than what it needed to by hearing testimony outside of this 6-month window, and they afford you the rights to then fight those, rebuttal those kind of arguments, or you stick to that 6-month window only and that's it, end of story. And it's done in a much shorter period of time. I'm determined to ensure that the judge no longer keeps her position as a judge. She's a new judge. She clearly doesn't have the technical and legal experience to reside over such a case. And if she's flagrantly disregarding multiple laws and code of conduct in the courts, how could she possibly be permitted to carry on doing it? It shouldn't be allowed.
It shouldn't be.
No, we need a complete change, a change of how family courts run, the ethics codes that they have to follow. You know, over 50 years of evidence of what is in the best interest for the child, and they completely ignore it. It doesn't exist.
Yeah. And this is why parents need to step forward, come out and fight for, if they're not going to fight, their kids are adults and they don't want to fight anymore, well, at least step out for someone else. Their own child will have children eventually. And then they think that their grandchildren, because they have grandchildren, they're going to come and say, hey, look, mom and dad, whoever, look what I got. No, that grandchild will be taken from them too. So if you continue the fight, you can't just stop because you're hurting other parents, other children, knowing that you are harboring all this pain and suffering because you lost your children. Well, you know, people talk about the war and people will get, you know, answers, help, support for these people that are dealing with war. Well, these people that are alienated will always get support too if they help someone else, because helping someone will make you feel better. Right?
If they had returned my daughter last November, upon finally informing me after 18 months that my daughter was actually in their care. I wouldn't have thought twice about suing them. I wouldn't have thought twice about looking into the legalities of what they're doing. I would have just been on my merry way. The fact that they've given me a year and a half to pull this agency apart, see how unethical they are, get in contact with various groups within the city that deal with the trauma and trying to get the Miranda rights. You know, at the moment they're trying to block Miranda rights, where when the ACS come knocking on your door, they have to inform you of your rights, that you don't have to let them into your house.
Right.
They can't force you to take a drugs or alcohol test.
Do not let them in. My advice, do not.
Otherwise, they have to go to court and prove that there's reasonable grounds.
Yes.
There is a lot of what they do is they basically go in under, I think it might be Article 10 or something like that, where they can go knock on the door, take a child away, and go to court within so many days of removing that child to get permission after the fact. That needs to end.
Yes.
Unless police officers turn up and there's a clear sign of something has gone wrong, they should be informing people of their rights.
That's
just
right.
because a state agent, you know, a police officer can't arrest you without telling you your rights. And that's kind of all over the world. So how come the ACS and agencies like it across the globe are permitted to come into your house, take your children away without informing you of what your rights are? And the reason why informing people of their rights is so important is because these agencies act illegally a lot of the time. So it's going to force them. You know, a lot of police originally didn't want to start wearing body cams because they knew that the bad eggs would soon be caught out and hauled over the coals for their behavior and their conduct. No different to the ACS. We need to personally get rid of it altogether and have something completely different in its place that's based on educational knowledge, you know, the knowledge it's out there on social psychology. But these people that are in these positions that allow this abuse to happen, they should be kicked out, sacked, sent to prison for some of the harm they've done to families.
Absolutely. I know I want to hold them all accountable. I mean, my children are seriously ill and there's nobody out there helping them.
No.
Nobody.
No.
And I'm supposed to sit here and watch this happen. So, you know, for 18 years, I've been fighting my butt off, trying to get some help. But because they're adults, you know, I can't do anything, but I can do something. I could stop it so that the next child does not go through this. I mean, I've been slammed on social media. They're cutting my posts off. They're blocking me from saying things. I mean, we've even gone as far as Karina Gould's office here in Canada. She's one step below Trudeau. She's the Governor General. And apparently she didn't know anything about parent alienation. Like, come on, you're the Governor General of Canada and you don't know what parent alienation is? But so she didn't show up and sent her secretary to sit in on the meeting. And I'm thinking, if she really cared, she'd be there. We have not heard from them since. It's been a year and a half. We've requested to get to Trudeau's office. I mean, Prime Minister Trudeau comes into Hamilton quite a bit, but he avoids us, the stronger parents that are fighting for children's rights. And it's not fair.
No, the thing I don't want to say I'm right on this, but what I've looked at so far, which dumbfounds me, New York City is a Democrat city. So it's a more liberal city. And yet New York City has got one of the most stringent child services in the country. When you start looking at places like Florida and other places that are traditionally Republican areas, they seem to have better quality of child service. Not perfect by any shape or means, but certainly better than New York City. So how can a city that professes to be liberal and understanding and all loving and you know, a mixing pot for literally hundreds of different ethnicities and religions and backgrounds and everything else, How can you have a city like that is hell bent on causing so much destruction to those families?
Well, didn't New York City clean the streets up in the 1990s from all the gangs, the drugs? They made all the street facings all nice. I mean, and then all of a sudden, children are being kidnapped and trafficked, and the streets are clean, but our children are being used. This is something that is huge in every city. It's not just New York. It's in Canada, like I said, it's in the UK, it's the US, everywhere.
Well, some of the problems is they've got, and I think this is a global issue. We have politicians in charge nowadays that, you know, about as much use as a chocolate fire guard. They don't really have a moral compass. They're pretty much all self-serving. They're all about, in these 4 years or 8 years I'm here, what can I get out of it?
Exactly.
So it's not about public life anymore. It's not about providing for the public and making society better for future generations. It's literally about what can I take out of it.
Right. The government is for us. Yeah. They work for us, not us working for them. And they got to understand, they want votes. They better do what they promise us. You know, we had them come up here in our city begging for their vote, for our votes. And, you know, they told us that they'd help us with grandparents' rights, parental alienation. I have not heard from them in the last vote.
We need major change.
Yes, we do. We do. We need honest people.
I am now pretty much an advocate of life of forcing change. You know,
Me too.
I've turned and made posts against the New York mayor that I will haunt him for the rest of his career and beyond, letting everybody know that he, as controller of his agencies in New York, is directly facilitating in child abuse. These people are that they have to be accountable. The mayor can be voted out. The people in New York City need to vote the mayor out. He's facilitating so much harm on families. A lot of the time, these are families that are less economic. They've got less money, you know, in their households. They're scrimping to get by. And then they get attacked on top of that. You know, being poor shouldn't be a crime. If we're looking at society and saying we must punish poor people and take their children away, well, who caused the issue? Was it the people who were too poor to provide a better life for their children? Or is it the government's fault for saying we didn't provide a good enough education system? We didn't plan ahead and have good jobs for these people that pay well to go into. Everything comes back to one problem, and it's a lack of a good education for everybody. And that's where we have to start. We have to make sure that people are taught psychology at school. They're given the tools to carry them through life so they can see when these things are happening to them. So there's a greater chance of this not happening to people in the future. There has to be a change. I can't see any other way forwards. Otherwise, we're just going to downward spiral in a race to the bottom where we're damaging so many families they don't become economically viable in society anymore. And then the people that are working and earning higher wages get taxed so much because of the damage that's being done. It has to be better education for everybody, an education that's based on letting people know what their rights are for a start. You know, especially in my daughter's case, she asked a question to help her peers and she got, you know, scorned for it. That should never happen. You know, I just don't understand why this isn't happening. It has to be better for society, but the cancer that we have in positions of power is the problem, and it needs to end.
It does. We've only got about 10 minutes left of the program. So, I mean, we don't know what's going to happen with you, but we do know, and we're hoping for the best outcome ever. And if we could help you through supporting you somehow in the next week before April 4th. Is there something we can do to say to the judge, hey, judge, look, because I want to read this to you. This is from Justice Taylor, and he wrote, in my view, there ought to be a mutual restraining harassment order, but I am not going to extend it to Nicole and Ashley, who were my children. One was 15, the other one was 17. So, because the father wanted a restraining order to keep me away from them. So right there, that's a sign of alienation. And then Justice wrote that I do have some concerns about what role Mr. Auld is playing behind the scenes in possibly influencing Nicole and Ashley. Then he really addresses that my lawyer, Mr. Simpson, made the submission, and it is an appropriate submission, that it is important when considering custody issues, which parent is best able to promote the relationship between the non-custodial parent and the children. And at minimum, he writes, it does not appear to me that Mr. Auld is promoting the relationship between Ashley and Nicole and the mother. And that concerns me, but the access will be left up to the discretion of the children. And then he goes on to say he gets the house and kids, and they'll pay support until the house sells, and tells me I don't have to pay child support, but the ex-husband has to pay spousal support. So that right there, he pitted the two of us against each other. He took it out, the ex took it out on me because he had to pay spousal support and I didn't pay child support. So he used the kids against me. Now, this judge was not stupid. He knew what he was doing. He has to be held accountable for telling me that I can't see my kids. He actually wrote too and said that he's giving me a phone call a day after raising them for 20 years by myself, a phone call a day. So when I called, of course, they're not going to answer. If they do answer, they would tell me to go F myself. I'm no longer family. I mean, this is my 18-year-old boy telling me this. Yeah. And then they don't answer the phone, or they move, don't tell you. I had no access to the medical records, the school. I couldn't even go to graduation. And now, I mean, shameful for my children to do this to me, knowing that they had a good mom. I don't care what anybody says. They are old enough to understand that you don't go between two parents unless there was 100% evidence of abuse, and they have zero evidence. And this is what the courts are relying on: hearsay, verbal, lies. And
the problem is the courts aren't relying on expert testimony. So even with my daughter's case, when my daughter's case file registered her as being 5'3" and weighing 70 pounds, which is about 5 stone or about 31 kilos at 5'3", 5'4". And the judge just went to the foster mother. Is Cherie's weight okay? So basically, the judge went to the person perpetuating the abuse to find out if it was abuse or not.
Yeah.
Now, what should have happened is it should have been a case of, I want an independent doctor's report on this child's weight, because weight deficit can have a huge, significant impact on long-term health. And
Absolutely.
It should be the same with parental alienation. The judge should be getting an independent expert witness who can sit down with the children, talk to them as to why they do not like another parent. When did this feeling start happening? Who facilitated this feeling that they have for that parent? And then that psychologist can make an educated, informed decision to report back to the court and say, in my expert kind of testimony, this is what's happened to this child, and then a court order should be given that enough time is awarded to the alienated parent to repair the damage that has been done. Now, sometimes that might be that the children are then sent to live with the parent who's been alienated. So that parent gets a chance to show the children that they love them and they can provide for them and they can meet their needs, to deprogram. If you get somebody who's been caught up in, say, a religious cult or something like that, and they escape, they have a deprogramming method. And it's the same method that's used for alienated children.
And this is all
So
it is.
this is what should be happening. Judges should never have the power to make an expert witness's decision without that expert telling them what is actually happening. That's what must happen. And to have a judge whose only job is to look at the law and try to apply it fairly, they're not a psychologist.
Nope.
They're not a behavioral scientist. They're not a social psychologist. They're nothing what's needed in any sort of qualification or experience that can make that sort of decision.
That's right.
And we have to look at children as well. My daughter at 10 years old is not old enough to make an informed decision.
My kids weren't either at 14.
No, if for argument's sake, my daughter went out and committed murder tomorrow, the argument would be made that she did not have the mental capacity to understand the consequences for her actions.
But yet here she is.
Yeah, if she's making a decision based on trauma, she can't legally be defined as having the ability to make that decision. Yet the judges, through their bias, allow this to happen. That's what we need.
And this is why, and this is why I'm
reduce the court time as well. There must be a, my attorney has turned and told me that my case has been going on a year and a half for permanency, and yet upstate in New York, couple of weeks, couple of months, cases in, out, done, gone. So why is it that it's just New York City with the Administration for Children's Services that's funded by the federal funds that keeps this dragging out for such a long period of time? Because they take too many children away. They don't get the expert witnesses making the testimonies needed, and they want to keep that machine well oiled to keep that money coming in to pay their wages. So it needs a monstrous change for the betterment of society.
Yes, we do. Big change. And it's like I said, it's good for them, but it's not good for us. They will use whatever tactic they want by saying, oh, the kid's old enough to do it, but the kid's not old enough to do it. I mean, are they or are they not? So they're using double standard here, and it's wrong. It's seriously wrong. And we know what the effects are to our children. They cannot deny the fact that our children are mentally and emotionally damaged. There are murders and suicides that should be held accountable by the court systems because they're putting kids into jails, prisons for no reason. They're setting them up to become violent young adolescents. You can't take a 6-year-old from the mother or the father and expect them to grow healthy.
No.
Kids need both parents. End of story.
I think just on this one last point, the simple way to see how certainly the United States is failing compared to the rest of the world is you look at the homicide rates amongst children. Now, compared to Europe, the murder rates for children up to 17 years old is something like 9 or 10 times what it is in the United States compared to Europe. When you look at Europe for young adults, 19 to I think 29 years old, it is a 22 times difference between murder rates in young adults, homicide rates in young adults between America and Europe.
Wow.
And you have to start asking yourself, why the disparity? And this is per 100,000 population. So it's a figure that can be used, as a good measure. So we have to ask ourselves, why is this the problem specifically to the United States? What can be done to make this better?
Their brains don't really fully develop. They say 25, but really, I think it's more like in their 30s, because in 30s, I know light bulbs clicked with me to realize I'm being abused by my ex-husband, or my husband at the time, and I need to start fighting for myself. When I was 25, I took it as being conditioned. I didn't know what it was like to be a wife. I mean, I grew up with 7 brothers. I was a sister, so I'm growing up to be a wife. But by the time 10 years passed, I knew I was getting abused. And that's when the children were coming. And that's when the children were getting abused. So light switches were switching. So when you take a child at 10, 11, 12, even younger, to make decisions on who they want to live with, they have no clue what they're getting into. They don't have that decision making, you know, they can't handle conflict when they get older because they weren't taught how to be. You don't just say, who do you choose? There has to be some kind of therapy on who to choose if they had to go to that point. But they don't even do that. They don't care. They put the kids on the spot and say, choose one. And then later on, they regret it and become rebellious, angry. They suffer health issues, PTSD. They suffer prolonged grief disorder because losing a parent through parent alienation is like a death grieving process, right?
Absolutely.
So, but thank you, Keith. I think we would like to have you back for a part 3 before
Certainly.
you leave.
I've got so much information and statistical data that I want to get out to the public to try and start a movement to end what is happening to children. It has to.
Would you like to do it before you finish the court or after?
Well, I'm pretty much set up as much as I can be for the court hearing now. So I'm literally, you know, in New York for another week or so before the court hearing. So I can probably, you know, make time for it. But
well, we could book you in next week after Easter.
Sure.
Probably you're here till the 4th, right?
Yeah, I've not booked my return flight home yet. I was supposed to have gone home yesterday, but I cancelled that and extended it. So I just need to give them the new date to fly home. We were given a date for court for the 10th as well. So, but apparently one of the attorneys hasn't written back that they can make that. So I don't know what's happening with that yet. So it's all kind of everything's on hold until we get some sort of answers.
Okay, well, we'll book you in for next week so the viewers can know to keep an eye out for Let's Talk with You
Sure.
between the 3rd and the 4th. And then,
yep.
Okay.
Obviously, the 4th I'm in court, so it'd have to be the 3rd.
The 3rd. That's the day before.
Yeah.
And then we'll have you back maybe for after the court.
Yeah. Yeah. More than happy
maybe we could even do a live Zoom while you're at court. Is that possible for you?
No, so we're not allowed to record inside the courtroom.
No, not inside, but outside.
Possibly, yeah. It would be amazing that if anybody that does watch this, if they want to come down to the court and sit in court and support me in person,
that would be good.
It would be amazing. Just to let the judge know that people are starting to pay attention, people are starting to listen. And she is being watched by general members of the public. So she will have to show her biases to everybody. Because I appreciate there might be some people sat back going, how much of this is correct and, you know, how much of that is nonsense. But, you know, everything that I've said is factually correct. And this is why they're trying to stop my freedom of speech by telling everybody about it. So the more people that turn up to court, whether they're a reporter, whether they've got a blog that they can distribute media out onto after the court hearing to see what is happening, how I'm being treated by these agencies.
I'm here.
That's how we'll start to destroy their system.
Yeah, we could link in before the court on the court steps, if you'd like, to let people know that you're going in, and we can do one as you're coming out.
Sure.
You just, send me a message and I'll set it up for you. even if it's a
Yep.
5-10 minute thing. It's all we need to hear. We're here to support you. We wish you all the best. And we pray for your daughter. I mean, you can't just take children away from parents. This is sick to give them to someone else to abuse them.
You're wrong. You can if you're the ACS or government agencies. You can do what you
Okay,
like.
but they're not right. They're not right people. They're
No.
you know, they're not even trained.
No.
They're not even trained. That's
Absolutely.
the problem. They think they can, just walk into someone's home. I remember CAS came into my home and my daughter got food poisoned by the father because he fed her raw beef. She got salmonella and was hospitalized. CAS came into my house accusing me of poisoning my daughter. But when they looked around and saw my house spotless, clean, and they're like, what are you talking about? They left. So the second time when CAS came, my daughter pushed me down the stairs and I took the other one shopping. When I got home, my house was surrounded by police and they wanted to come into my house. And I said, what for? What do you want to come in my house for? I wouldn't let them. So they could not take my children from me. So they were 15 or 14 and 16 at the time. So I said to CAS, no, you're not coming in my house. Are you crazy? So I got them. And they literally said that there was nothing that they can get me on because they knew I was not an abusive mother and watched my daughter rip a piercing out of her eyebrow in front of them. I'm sitting beside my daughter and my daughter screamed saying, I just beat her. Well, I looked and there's blood all over her finger. And I said to the CAS worker, I said, you had your head down writing a note, but look at her finger. And right away, CAS knew my daughter was bipolar and she needed help, but no one's given her help. So, if our children are abusive in court, they better get some psych evaluation on these children before they make them any worse, because it's not going to help them in the long run.
Absolutely.
But anyways, Keith, we'll see you next week on the 3rd. I hope you have a good Easter out in New York, and we just keep praying for you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And alienated parents, grandparents, children worldwide, therapists, doctors, lawyers, judges, I hope you are listening to the pain that parents are dealing with after you've done all the damage to their children. This is wrong. This is seriously wrong. And it's the justice system is allowing professionals to abuse our children. And that is so unfair to us because we're trying to raise healthy kids. And we can't do it when they are being pulled and brainwashed by someone else. But anyways, thank you for tuning in to Let's Talk Real Talk. Andy had to leave on an emergency. We are sorry again that he had to go. He has a sick wife that had COVID for the last 5 months, and he's dealing with chemo and all that for her now. I mean, we pray for Andy's family as well, and everybody out there who's dealing with parental alienation, because that makes everybody sick in the long run. Heart disease, liver disease, kidney disease. We're all suffering with something due to the abuse of our children, and all we could do is sit back and watch. That's not right. So yes, until next time, thanks again. Actually, we have Sunday night coming on to the Andy Martens show with Samantha Ellis at 8 p.m. No, sorry, my apologies. We are in April, so it'll be Jerry Nicholas at 8 p.m. So thank you, everybody else out there, and we'll see you soon. Thanks again on Let's Talk Real Talk, and thank you.